12. February 1948. Munich, American zone. A German civilian writes in a narrow ledger crowded by paper and winter breath, "I came to separate wolves from sheep. Most days, all I see is grey fur and tired faces." His name is Karl Brenner. He is 31. He has a stamp in his hand and a scarf around his neck because the heat fails for days at a time. He has a stack of Spruchkammer files as tall as his knee and a pencil worn down to a stub. He writes that line in a notebook meant for ration tallies and interview times. He does not say it out loud. You didn't say such things out loud in 1948 Munich. You wrote them quietly on the kind of paper you could burn. The pages around it are numbers, dates, names, a column marked Mitläufer. Followers. It is the most common word in the room. The city around him is still broken. The story did not begin in 1948. It began in ruins. 1. May 1945. Munich. The war ends for the city in sirens and the clatter of boots. A military government leaflet posted on a peeled wall lists the curfew, 9 at night. No gatherings, turn in weapons, stay off the streets. A white star on a green truck brushes past a woman pushing a child on a wheelbarrow with no tire. She looks down and counts bread coupons. Trümmerfrauen work in lines. They pass bricks from hand to hand like a rosary made of red dust and sharp edges. A child is missing in every block. The radio is silence, and then a stranger's voice. People wait by postal kiosks for letters that are never written. The arithmetic of the aftermath is simple and brutal. Too few rooms, too many bodies. The arithmetic of guilt is not arithmetic, it is a cloud. Occupation reports out of the Office of Military Government United States, OMGU, read like dispatches from a famine that wore a uniform in the day and rags at night. The city's caloric ration in the summer of 1945 is a number that no student of human bodies should see on a chart. 1,200 calories, 900 sometimes less. The normal consumer category yields a loop of bread like a belt. For heavy workers, the ration is more generous. On paper. On paper, the harvest is not late. On paper, the trains arrive. In alleys, new markets bloom. A kilogram of butter costs more than a week's wages. But wages lost their meaning. The currency floats and sinks with rumor and fear. A black market emerges. Cigarettes become money. Lucky Strikes, Chesterfields. 1 cigarette equals a tram ride, then 2. 10 cigarettes equal a shirt. A pack equals meat if you can find it. The cigarette is the unit, reads an Allied intelligence summary from August 1946. The cigarette is also the index. When it disappears, we expect unrest. It disappears often. You could barter a wedding ring for flour in 1946. You could barter a silver spoon for coal. The mathematics of calories are arithmetic without mercy. 900 calories a day for a mother who nurses means her milk runs thin. The hunger winter of 1946 to 47 is a winter of numbers etched into bones. 2,000 people line at a soup kitchen run by a parish whose priest is on a watch list for sermons he gave in 1939. The city is full of lists. Lists of rubble heaps to be cleared. Lists of building permits to be denied. Lists of party memberships to be declared. Denazification begins with a form and a promise. The form is the Fragebogen. It is 131 questions if you count the lines for names of your friends. Date of NSDAP enrollment. Membership in the SA, SS, NS Frauenschaft, Hitlerjugend, BDM. Offices held. Donations made. Does your aunt count as an associate? The promise is this: we will separate the wolves from the sheep. The promise is the promise Karl writes with. It is a job and a sentence. Karl fills out his own form in July 1945. Member of the NSDAP? No. Affiliated organizations? Deutsche Arbeitsfrau, by requirement of employment. He had been a clerk in a municipal tax office. He wore a uniform when called, filed papers at a Wehrmacht repair depot, lost 2 fingers to frostbite in the winter of 1944 near the Hunsrück clearing snow. He says he never joined. He says he kept his head down. He says he did not shout. He writes no many times. He is telling the truth as he knows it. The truth is a small fire cupped in 2 hands. You must shield it or blow it out. Occupation regulations are precise, then mutable. JCS 1067, the directive for the U.S. military government, forbids measures that might revive the economy too quickly or maintain a militarized industry. It orders the removal and exclusion of Nazis from public life. In the autumn of 1945 through the spring of 1946, the plan sounds definite. By the winter of 1946-47, certainty thins like soup. The arithmetic of denazification begins with millions. In the American zone, as archived in Bundesarchiv records, more than 13 million forms will be distributed, roughly 9.5 million returned. There is a pile of paper with a population the size of Belgium. The Spruchkammer, special chambers, are set up to judge the forms and the people attached to them. 5 categories are written on the chalkboard in the first weeks. I, Hauptschuldig, major offenders. 2, Belastet offenders. 3, Minder Belastet, lesser offenders. IV, Mitläufer, followers. V, Entlastet, exonerated. It is a neat schema. Neat schemers struggle in broken cities. Karl's story crosses their story in early 1946. He has a talent for tidy handwriting and a quiet face. An American lieutenant with a map under his arm reads his form and says, "Can you translate?" Karl can. He can also calculate. USC Office 6, Office 6, Office 6 needs German clerks. The pay is food and coal coupons. The work is reading shoes. Shoes are what come into the room every morning. Shoes and the faces above them. The people who stand before the panel and say, "I was a Mitläufer." The people who say, "I held a position, yes, but only because it was necessary for my family." The people who say, "I did not know." The people who say little. The people who weep. The people who weep. The panel is 3 Germans under Allied supervision in Munich's Obersendling and Schwabing and in the drafty rooms of the Justizpalast. Karl sits to the side, takes notes, stamps things, translates questions. There is a formality to it. State your name, remove your hat. Do you understand the question, which feels like theatre performed on a blank stage? The documents are heavy with people who are not there. Witnesses called, affidavits read, letters sent to addresses that are now courtyards. A Purcell shine, a Purcell certificate, becomes a currency of cleanliness. The word is a joke and not a joke. Purcell is a washing detergent. A Purcell shine is a statement from a respected person that you were decent, that you saved a neighbor, that you stressed the socialist in National Socialism, that you were only a member for business reasons. Some of these statements are true. Some are kindness. Some are traded for favors. The archives keep them all the same way on the same acid-free folders. There is a man named Vogt. He had been a teacher before 1933. He joined the party in 1937 to keep his post. He hosted winter relief collections. He wrote an essay in 1942 about the spirit of the people. His students are now 22 years old and hungry. 3 of them bring statements. He protected the Jewish boy in our class, one says on a handwritten page that smells like potatoes. A DP in the next county remembers him differently. He was silent when men came to take the boy, it says in a displaced persons committee statement in Landsberg. He closed the door and did not look. What does the law say silence is worth? What does decency weighed against complicity weigh? The mathematics of guilt are not neat. There is no scale calibrated to silent in 1942 at a temperature of 0°C, at a barometric pressure of fear. The panels do their arithmetic anyway. Vote receives a judgment, IV, Mitläufer. Fine of 200 Reichsmarks, later commuted because the currency is vanishing. He is barred from teaching for 2 years. He works clearing rubble. He shows up every morning at 7, his back straight. In 1948, the school needs a teacher. The headmaster writes, "He is a man of order. The children need to read." He returns to the classroom. In 1952, he is a respected civic figure. In 1968, a student will shout at him. Vought will hold the chalk a moment, then write a date on the board. The denazification panels sit for hours with faces. They stamp forms. They sort human histories into 5 bins and an uncountable number of footnotes. The numbers on the monthly reports are their own story. By the end of 1947 in the US zone, as collated in Allied intelligence summaries, less than 1% of the processed cases are Category 1, a few percent Category 3, about 10% Category 3. The rest, Mitläufer or exonerated. The hardcore are rare. The grey is vast. The grey signs the keep the lights, on form or the please, return to work form, and goes back to a desk or a lathe. The overload is total. There are too many questionnaires. There are too many men whose ranks look important but who never left their chairs. There are too many who left their chairs and returned with something on their clothes. The Spruchkammer Akten, the denazification files, stack in basement corridors. Allied observer reports say progress slow. Political pressure says speed. The Cold War says stability. The mathematics of priorities changes the outcome of the arithmetic. The timeline shifts. The US officer in charge of Bavaria in 1946 and 1947, General Lucius Clay, reads the weather of the world. Stalin in Eastern Europe is consolidating. The Berlin question sharpens. The bizone, the administrative joining of the American and British zones, forms in January 1947 because 2 bureaucracies work better than 3. Denazification must fit into budgets and treaty drafts. In late 1947, denazification is turned over to German authorities with broad instructions and narrowed goals. The categories remain. The pressure to close becomes more urgent. A more marketable Germany is needed for a more secure Europe. It is not cynical to observe this. It is systemic. The phrase, "the arithmetic of the Cold War," enters memoranda in more careful words. Karl is inside this. He is a small cog. He reads all the words on the forms and learns that the city did not have demons and angels only. It had brutes who smiled. It had fearful fathers. It had idealists who welded their idealism to the wrong iron. It had cowards. It had saboteurs of conscience who whispered on behalf of a neighbor and disappeared into the fog of memory after. He writes one line that will risk his job if it traveled too far. He writes many lines that are safe. Case 743021. Category 4. Case 743068. Category V. Stamp. Ink. Stamp. Ink. The mathematics of food do not pause for the mathematics of guilt. People eat so they can attend their own hearings. The hunger winter is a season of omission. You write less in your diary because your hand shakes. An Allied soldier throws a chocolate bar from a truck and causes a fight. The snow comes. Coal allocations are miscalculated. A bureaucrat in Stuttgart writes the wrong number on a distribution list. Basements become bunkers against winter and boredom. Women gather their hair under headscarves to carry bricks, and their photographs become a gesture a country will later use to tell a story of dignity that leaves out too much. Displaced persons live in clusters outside the city. Feldafing, 1 hour by train, Landsberg, Ferrenwald. These are places with gates and signs in Yiddish and Polish and Russian. These are towns where survivors mend themselves together with paper and ritual and anger. They form committees and write constitutions and publish newspapers with presses salvaged from the towns that ignored them. "We are alive," announces a headline in a DP paper. "We demand. We remember. We insist." The tone is that of recovery and threat. Germans are not to enter these camps without permission. Guards enforce this. Karl passes these places on trains. He does not enter. He reads reports about them. DP camps show signs of political organization, says an OM Gus report from September 1946. Tensions with local German populations ongoing. There are incidents in the streets near the camps. A German market seller refuses to sell. A DP demands to buy with cigarettes. A fight breaks out. The police arrive. In file numbers, it looks small. On the faces of the people, it is not small. In the city, there are slogans that re-describe the past quickly. Bits of code. "We were misled. We are all victims of war. We did not know about the camps. Some did know. Some suspected. Some knew the exact schedule of trains through Dachau because they stood at a crossing regularly on their way to work and took off their hat any time a uniform passed, regardless of the color. Some covered their ears at the nights when all dogs barked." The mathematics of denial is ingenious. It balances accounts by deleting entries. A letter from Karl's cousin Marta in November 1945 says, "If you see our Hans, tell him his mother waits." Hans died near Breslau in January 1945. There is no body. There will never be a grave. There is no witness. There is a story told over a bowl of soup exactly twice and then never again. It goes like this. There were so many bodies the river slowed. Then the river did not slow. Then the river froze. Millions flow the other way. The arithmetic of displacement is numbers with feet walking across a map. Germans expelled from Silesia, Pomerania, East Prussia, the Sudetenland arrive at platforms in Munich with bed frames on their backs and children wrapped in shawls. January 1946. March 1947. The trains arrive in the morning because policemen sleep in the morning. The towns are unready. The expellees are called names by locals who also have no room and also lost brothers. "We lost Hans in Kassel," says a man behind a market stall. "What about us?" The expellee woman says nothing. She is thrown into the arithmetic of scarcity, and in the arithmetic of scarcity, the sum of all selves is a fight over a mattress. Occupation records note the tension without surprise. Integration of expellees into rural districts remains problematic. Locals refer to expellees as foreigners, although both groups are German speakers, reads a U.S. Civil Affairs brief from April 1946. The numbers in the ledger of Western Germany are enormous. More than 12 million ethnic Germans expelled from the East between 1945 and 1949. Roughly 8 million end up in the Western zones. In Bavaria, almost 1 in 4 is an expellee by 1947. The mathematics of rooms is brutal. 1 room per family is an aspiration, not a plan. The town council divides a farmhouse into 3 families, then 5. A courtroom hearing in Garmisch over a requisitioned bedroom ends with the bed staying with the newcomer and the old man sleeping in the kitchen. Everyone loses. The decision finds its way into a file at the Bayerisches Hauptstaatsarchiv labeled Wohnungszuweisungen. The question of who is entitled drags across the years like a sack of coal, too heavy for the children who pull it. Who is entitled to a job? Who is entitled to return to a job? Who is entitled to judge those who held jobs when other people were in cattle cars? In the U.S. zone's Denazification, there are laws passed and then modified. There are fines levied against those classified as belastet. There are bans from office. There are also amnesties. In 1948, under pressure from American policy to consolidate West German administration and from German political parties who need the votes of millions of those labeled Mitläufer, most restrictions are softened. The West German Bundestag will later pass Article 31 in 1951, restoring pension rights and civil service positions to many erstwhile Nazi-era employees. The logic is explicit in party meeting minutes, archived in the Bundesarchiv. Continuity equals stability, stability equals democracy. Democracy must be defended against the East. We need functionaries who know how to push paper. It is a calculus of expedience that becomes morality by repetition. Karl witnesses this conversion on the street-level ledger. He sees a man removed as a Kreisleiter, a district leader, for 6 months, then returned to a municipal planning desk as an assistant. He sees a police commander barred from senior rank become head of a private security firm, then consulted by the same police station he left. He sees a judge who signed off on Rassenschande. Cases in 1938 sit again in a courtroom in 1949, his wig clean. The files say, Category 3, lesser offender, rehabilitated. The newspapers say nothing. The radio mentions it in the voice used for traffic. He also sees men who did terrible things go to prison. In 1946 and 1947, the trials tied to the Nuremberg proceedings convict men whose names traveled beyond their apartments into history books, industrialists, generals, doctors. The camera lights are bright. The cameras are American. The transcripts are in English with German translations appended. The sentences can be heavy. Many are commuted, many are not. The archives are full of people with 2 names, a legal name and a name attached to a number in a file called Case X. The mathematics of justice measured against millions of cases is a heartbreaking ratio. Karl's mother keeps a radio in the kitchen. On 20th June 1948, the voice on the radio announces the currency reform. Reichsmarks are out, Deutsche Marks are in. The old notes will be stamped and die. Each person receives 40 Deutsche Marks at first, then a bit more. There is an overnight miracle. Store shelves fill as hoarded goods reappear to chase a new unit. The black market falters. People say the new bills smell like soap and promise. People step carefully into stores as if they break a spell. The stories of the first day of new money read like parables. A woman buys a pair of shoes she has touched twice a week for months and placed back on the shelf. A man buys butter without looking around. A child holds a coin and thinks it is the weight of life. The arithmetic of money changes the arithmetic of hunger and quiets the arithmetic of rage for a while. Karl finds work in this new mathematics. The city wants paper to move faster. He is moved from the Spruchkammer to a personnel office in a factory rebuilt from ash and bent steel, a Maschinenfabrik on Landsberger Straße. The machines made for poles and pipes before the war, camshafts during the war, and now make compressors. The owner had been a party member and put flags on the factory on important days. He never yelled. Or he did. His widow runs the firm now and says, "We will build for air, not for tanks." She means refrigeration. She means money that makes food stay cold. Karl becomes the man who holds the personnel files and checks, as the new regulations demand, that those who apply for supervisory positions are not disqualified by their past. He is the same man he was across a corridor. He stamps and files and is given an office with a window. He watches the American trucks begin to pull into the yard with crates labeled ERP. The Marshall Plan, officially the European Recovery Program, sends machines and grain and a new vocabulary: productivity, output, time-motion studies. Ludwig Erhard speaks on the radio about the soziale Marktwirtschaft, the social market economy. capitalism with a conscience or an aspiration to one. Union men sit at tables with management and say, "We will trade wage restraint for stability and more food." The city's skyline begins to grow with cranes that look like Christian crosses made by engineers. German newspapers print photographs of docks in Bremen with American wheat pouring like gold. They also print photographs of ceremonies that tell a careful story of German suffering and resilience. Air raid victims are memorialized. Expellees hold marches and meetings. The Vertriebenen Verbände become an organized chorus. A day called the Day of Homeland is observed with speeches that include the word injustice and rarely the word war guilt. School books are revised. They show bullet points about opposition to dictatorship. They assign poems about ruins and mothers with the stoic gaze of icons. They are honest within a narrow frame. They teach economic lessons better than moral ones because moral lessons are expensive. Carl watches a history text drafted in 1950 cross his desk because the school board asked him to pass it to a teacher who once sat in his hearing. It says, "The years 1933–1945 witnessed the suppression of democracy. Many Germans opposed this, many suffered. The war ended with destruction in our cities and the loss of the Eastern territories. It is not wrong. It is not complete." He puts the book in a folder and writes the date on the tab. In his notebook he writes other dates. He writes names he cannot say. Anna from the next building who sent soup to an old Jewish woman in 1941 and then looked away when the old woman was taken. He writes in 1948, "The state wants us to become new. Men who were wolves paint their faces with the ash of sorrow and call themselves sheep." He does not show this to anyone. He does not want to lose his job. He does not want to be brave. He wants to survive as decently as possible. It is not a romantic aspiration. It is a daily one. The arithmetic of decency is a thin line walked by people who have to breathe first. In the summer of 1949, the Basic Law is adopted in Bonn. The Federal Republic is a thing. The GDR to the east is a thing. Carl reads the papers and senses the high stakes carried quietly in headlines. The Berlin airlift is still in the air. The Cold War has stopped being a metaphor and started being a logistics schedule. The mathematics of allegiance is recalibrated. To become a good West German is to learn a three-part exercise. Say that you were deceived. Say that you learned. Say that you believe in democracy. For many, it is honest. For many, it is a costume worn without bitterness. For some, it is a trick done with the mirror. Carl is tired. "I came to separate wolves from sheep." He repeats the line in his head when he reads another file for a promotion at the factory. The man in question joined the party in 1938 for reasons that need no explanation. He worked competently. He was on the board that awarded contracts for prisoner labor during 1943, if your legal definition of board includes a table and a pencil. He says, "I was a Mitläufer." He says, "We all were." He says it with the calm of a man who knows the word has become a safe harbor. Carl stamps his form to approve. He does not add a note. He tells himself that the man will be watched. He tells himself that none of us should live under the heaviest version of ourselves for all time. In 1951, the Bundestag passes Article 131. Former public employees who were carried out of offices in 1945 and 1946 return to them. The language in the law is long and qualified. Its effect is quick. In Carl's city, former prosecutors and police officers and school inspectors and finance clerks walk up the same stairs they walked before, older at the edges. They do their work. A sense of settledness begins to settle. Some victims find other paths. Jewish survivors in the DP camps emigrate. The state of Israel is real. Ships leave for Haifa, and then Ashdod. and hope and fear are loaded equally on the docks. Other survivors settle in America. Some stay in Germany for reasons that no one is allowed to question without indecency. Restitution claims are filed in courts that return to business with judges who have new faces and old hands. The mathematics of compensation is meticulous and unsatisfying. This painting, yes. That store, maybe. That factory, no. That life, unquantifiable, which is to say beyond the willingness of state budgets. The paperwork piles up in the restitution offices, a new layer of justice drawn in ink. Karl's factory grows. He is promoted to head of personnel. He now reads fewer Spruchkammer files and more applications for apprenticeships. The town is peppered with new stores and new advertisements for washing machines. The tram rails shine under new weight. Montages that will later be called Wirtschaftswunder archive themselves in catalogues and in the smiles of people who can take vacations again. The country looks forward, in postcards and in the inversion of the gaze that drink helps with. There are still marks, literal ones. A wall in the alley behind Karl's house bears a stain, the shape of a small country where a woman died during a raid. Nobody scrubs it, nobody mentions it. Children are told not to play there by parents who are tired of telling children anything about before. A series of trials in the mid-1950s and later briefly returns the past to courtrooms. The Einsatzgruppen trial in 1958, later in the 1960s, Frankfurt. Witnesses tell stories that do not fit in ledgers and make men like Karl tighten their jaws and go on with their day. He reads one such article in the Süddeutsche Zeitung. He folds the paper neatly and puts it next to his plate. He says nothing. He cannot say nothing forever, but he can say it today. In the factory, a man who simply did what was asked says he deserves a raise. He does. He built good compressors. The math that matters to his household emphatically supports his claim. He returns home to a building that smells of coal and boiled cabbage. He tells his wife that his boss approved. He cannot see that his boss wrote the stamp with the weight of a memory he cannot share. He is a citizen of a long, thin compromise. Karl is married by 1953. He and Herta have a daughter. They buy a wardrobe second-hand and hang a mirror on its door. The mirror reflects a man who looks like a clerk in a healthy country. His hair thins. He learns to check certificates of political loyalty that now say constitutional. When he stamps someone, "Okay for union liaison," he occasionally keeps a finger on the edge of the stamp so it will not fall too hard. He reads, at night, books that are not on lists. He reads, in 1952, an oral history published by a small press in Cologne in which a woman writes of trying to bring potatoes to her neighbor in 1944 and being told to step back from the door by a man with a pistol who says simple words slowly. He reads, in 1954, a novel about the war that is about the dirt on a uniform more than the medals. He writes in his notebook, "We have covered our memory with a cloth. We wash the cloth. We forget what is underneath." He closes the book and goes to sleep. He wakes and makes coffee and goes to work. The Cold War becomes a domestic arrangement. The Americans are no longer occupiers. They are allies. The base still stands outside the city. The PX still sells cigarettes and jeans. The kids in town look at their shoes. The word "Ami" moves from a growl to a shrug. The Soviets are invisible, but on the radio they are anywhere at once. A campaign poster shows a young family and a fence. "Konrad Adenauer ist sicherer," it reads, in one phrasing or another. Safety is the currency of politics now. Everybody wants it. The calculus is clear. Conviction plus prosperity equals legitimacy. Karl is not political in a way that makes speeches. He votes for the party that promises order and reasonable wages. He nods when someone mentions that the Social Democrats are too doctrinaire to understand business. He nods when someone else says the Catholics are keeping their altar candles too high at City Hall. He nods often. He is tired of believing too much in anything. In 1956, his mother dies, her lungs beat up by the city's humorless coal. He sorts her papers. He finds a letter from 1942 addressed to a woman with a Jewish name in the next street offering 2 eggs. He sees 2 eggs weighing more than 2 kilograms. He puts the letter back. He does not put it in the trash. The factory starts a Works Council education program in 1957. Karl gives a talk about the new culture of labor relations under the Basic Law. He says the word co-determination earnestly. He means it. He also knows it hides the fact that the man on the other end of the table used to wear another kind of armband. He does not say that. The workers in the back row smoke. The back row always does. He meets a young boy in 1959 in the factory canteen, the son of a new line supervisor. The boy is assigned to write a report in school on our city's recovery. The boy asks Karl for help. Karl points to photographs and cranes. He points to the machines that replace hands. He says the numbers. He says, "This is the output today. This is the output 5 years ago." He does not say the color of ash he remembers. In 1961, the wall goes up in Berlin. The newspapers write like knives. The vocabulary of guilt and redemption is replaced wholesale by the vocabulary of East and West. The Spruchkammer files, already dusty, are placed in basements and bureaucratic mausoleums. The new argument is about missiles and memory only as it supports strategy. The moral arguments are a luxury. Luxuries are not permitted when maps move. Karl is now the age where men either start talking or keep quiet forever. He does not yet know which he is. He buys a new suit. He keeps the old one for walking to funerals. He writes another line in his notebook that is more dangerous than the first by being more tired. We have built a new house on the old ground. Some of the ground is graves. We do not dig too deep. Bundesarchiv holdings show a country that chose amnesties in 1954 and 1958 for sentences related to the National Socialist period, under the logic that the nation had to move forward. Oral histories show living rooms where people did not discuss what they did in 1943 to remain untroubled in 1953. Occupation reports from 1945 to 1949 show a young Germany that had to choose across hunger and cold and threat. The files tell what the files tell. The dead do not amend them. Karl stops visiting the archive reading room in the old palace because his work does not require it now. The stamp in his drawer is for vacation approvals. In 1963, a magazine runs a feature about the generation born after the war, impatient and angry and suspicious of the quiet. He reads it, and he folds it, and he places it next to the more discreet article about an exhibition of Trümmerfrau photographs that reduces women to icons in a way that lets men forget their courage, was reaction to a man's history. He gets angry for the first time in a long time. He puts the anger in the drawer, next to the stamps. His daughter brings home a schoolbook. It has a chapter titled 12 Hard Years and another titled The Golden Fifties. The pictures are well chosen. The text glides. He asks her what her teacher says about 1938. She says, "It was long ago." He nods. He does not shout. He understands why men in 1948 did not always shout. He hates that he understands it. He makes tea for her and sits and says, "It mattered." He says no more. He does not know how to say more without break. There, in the act of not breaking, is another mathematics. The arithmetic of survival created an algebra of silence. The silence had terms you could not always see. It held together households. It made civic lives possible. It also held down the truth like a paperweight holds down a letter people were afraid the wind would blow. He writes a last entry in the notebook in December 1965, after a Sunday spent in church where a sermon mentions a kind of guilt, then veers into comfort before discomfort can bite. The entry starts with the earliest line. I came to separate wolves from sheep. He adds the rest. Most days I saw grey fur and tired faces. He underlines tired. He closes the notebook. He holds it a minute. He puts it away. In 1948, he gave up something. It was not only a job. It was an idea that you could sort a nation into boxes and call the work done. He kept sitting with papers. He approved men he might not have approved in a burning world. He made decisions that an American lieutenant expected him to make. He made decisions that a union activist wanted him to make. He made decisions that allowed his daughter to move through a city without stepping over rubble, only around the shadows of knowledge. He walks home past the aluminum letters of a new department store on Kaufingerstrasse, their shine the color of a serious optimism. He,